Computer. Okay, we're recording. Great.
Awesome.
What's up,
What's up?
man?
Just chilling at home.
Yeah.
Glad I've got a two-bedroom apartment now instead of a studio, but
Yep. Think,
it's still kind of tough being stuck, right?
yeah, it's not necessarily easy unless you're like my mother who never goes out anywhere. And she's
Right.
like
Is she
she's like,
noticing much of a difference?
I don't think so. I'm assuming that more people are probably like calling her like,
Yeah,
oh hey, what's going on? Whereas
right.
before I'd just be like, hey, I'm just kind of like chilling out watching TV.
Right, like everybody else is on her pace now. Like they're all like in the same boat and they're like, "Oh shit, we got to check in."
Damn, like what? I wonder what.
Yeah,
Oh, is this what you do? Okay, all right, cool. She's probably the
totally.
expert. She should actually probably be talking to people right now. And be like, oh no, it'll be fine.
This is how you hunker down, stay in, chill out. You don't need to go anywhere. Just relax. Yeah,
Exactly.
totally.
Yeah, maybe I'll
Yeah,
get her on the podcast.
I mean, she's kind of similar to us because of the 4 month old. Like the last 4 months have been mostly indoors. This is
Sure,
different, but it's yeah, we're a little bit used to it at least.
great. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the purpose of we talked about it before. The purpose of us recording and doing a podcast is, yeah, we kind of want to backtrack and tell folks who we are and how Love Lab came
Yep.
to be around and um,
Be on
yeah,
a computer screen in the back of a podcast episode like it is right now.
yeah,
Looking great, by the way.
yeah,
Like
I
nicely
know,
done with the logo
right?
placement.
Looks kind of cool. I was playing around. I was like, oh my god, yeah, was you? I mean, you created it, and then why not?
You got it up. I mean, and the benefit to sheltering in place is you are just like getting this podcasting studio up and running. Like
Yeah,
you're locked and loaded now.
absolutely.
That's
So
great.
yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if we want to. Yeah, I don't know where.
Get the backstory, kind of tell people how we got started doing this stuff.
Yeah, I think I think it's important. We have it on. I think we met. Yeah, we met at a music and art festival, and that's kind of where the relationship started. And we, had. I think that's interesting in itself when we talk about like people who've been to like festivals or just large events. When you meet people, you can have that energy to say, oh hey, like, yeah, let's connect, we had some good times, like, and that can easily just slip through the cracks, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
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 yeah.
we'll keep in touch, like, all right, cool, maybe.
Which we actually kind of didn't until that Giants game. And it was like, what, like a month or so after Lightning in a Bottle that we really got talking. But what I was thinking, what's funny about that is like, I think the first time we actually met, because when we started talking about the Giants game, we were like, oh, it's been a while since the festival. We haven't kept up. Like, let's chat. We started catching up. Started talking about conversation and community and like the
Mhm.
lack of it in our current culture and like how to start like deeper conversations, even to have like a more in-depth community with the people you see every day. Because I think that's kind of like that was a big part of the conversation that we started talking about, is just like
Right.
how we miss each other. This was right after the 2016 election. We were like
Sure.
talking about like a lot of people been missing each other. But what I was going to say, what's funny is I think where we actually met was at that dinner party where we had to
Oh,
wait
well,
two
that was the
hours,
initial. That was
right?
the initial. Yes, actually, you're absolutely correct. It was a good friend of our dentist's
Yep.
a dinner party. Yeah.
Took his sweet time making, I mean, it was delicious handmade gnocchi. So like it was worth the wait. But it was like the six of us or whatever that were waiting for the food like 2 hours in their living room, like while they were finishing the gnocchi. Like that's such a good story. But that's actually like that's where we met. And then we were like did the festival, and then we were talking about like how do we do, like basically like how do we do a dinner where we fill that 2 hours of waiting for the gnocchi time with like conversation, like going deeper and like, yeah, I think yeah. And it's interesting how like that kind of, we had those meetings, we started talking about just how to have deeper conversations, how to meet each other, how to see each other, how to like even just connect with the people that are in your day-to-day life, not to mention like adding more people in and like growing your community. Um, but yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it kind of comes back to, um, the way that we connected at the music festival, I think, and like even like our artist selves like kind of connecting up. And then it was cool to see this like community building relationship, like the way that we just like talk, and both of us are people that like talk to people, want to start conversations.
Mhm.
um but it kind of like actually what we didn't start by like hosting a dinner or a walk or trying to actually start a conversation. What we started doing first was the art collaboration, and it
Sure.
all kind of grew out of like you starting to get into music and me painting live and us trying to set up like an experience for people that was a little bit deeper than just the normal way you maybe go to a show or go to a party or whatnot, right?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I think that art really kind of is a found. Like we talk about it from time to time, and our pursuit of art and what that process is like. But yeah, it started off with just two people sharing their ideas and sharing their perspectives, and then kind of talking about, well, okay, well, we noticed something, like, right, we noticed this disconnection among people here in the Bay Area, specifically in San Francisco, because that's where we both live. uh, but yeah, I mean, like it's to folks who have been around us for the first time, they know, they're like, oh my God, like you guys must know each other for like a really long time, right? We're going back. They're like, oh no, not really, man. We just really hit it off in terms of being and being
Yeah.
different people, right? Like being from like other parts of the country. You know what I mean? You're from the Midwest in Missouri. I grew up here in San Francisco. Faced, on paper, just different experiences, right? But we're able to, yeah, really kind of honed in on something that we both cared about, which is connection and seeing
Mm,
how important it is in our own lives. So in a way, it was kind of selfish, right? We're like, man, I think people don't recognize how great it can be when you connect with other people, right?
yeah.
Like, point blank, period. And specifically people who are different than you, right?
Yeah.
Like we all, I think that we notice that there is this kind of like tribalism going on, where it's hard for people to like step outside of normal for them,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
And hear different perspectives that they might not necessarily agree with. And I think
And
that's
it,
been, go ahead. Good.
well, yeah, I was thinking like we talked about this, like how it's even hard if you acknowledge a desire to do that. Like it's one barrier to even get to the point where you're like, I'd like to make some friends that are different than me. I'd like to understand some different
Hmm.
perspectives. I'd like to see the other side of this, even though I mean, I'm from the Midwest, but now that I've been here on the West Coast for a long time, like it's hard for me to understand like a conservative Midwestern perspective now sometimes. But like, I think we had that desire to like know other people, get to know other perspectives. And then even when you're in that place, like it can be really hard to actually like carve out the space for that and go up and talk to somebody, try to like build a friendship, like go deeper. Even when you want to, even when you're like, this is a good idea to like connect with other people. And I think that, I mean, that's a big part of the way that I see like a lot of the work that we've done with Love Lab. One specific part of it I think that we've talked a lot about is like connecting like the most needy populations in our city, like the most marginalized, the people with the less privilege, with the tech community, who's like one of the populations in the city that has the most power, the most privilege, like the most wealth.
Sure.
And
Access.
how to kind of like, yeah, like connect those two, like how to kind of get past all the, I don't know, the awkwardness. Even if you want to help, like it's still such a big barrier to figure out like how to help somebody that's different than you, how to get to know somebody. And I feel like both you and I just kind of have that like, I mean, it's different. Like we're very different, but we both have this kind of like relentless drive to understand other people, to get to know, to like make those connections. Like if we don't understand something or we don't know somebody, like we want to learn about it. And I think that like those kind of matching drives in both of us just kind of snowballed into this, this thing that we've been doing.
Yeah. So where do you get that from? I think that's I'm like you just said, you're like we're people who are curious and fascinated by like other
Yeah.
people's stories. So what like were you always like that? Like growing up, I mean, even as a kid, like did your folks or your family were like, oh yeah, Austin was a kid who just like walked up to people and was like, who are you? You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know if that's the case,
Yeah.
but like, are there
Right. Right.
things that you can remember where you're like, yeah, I've kind of been this way, or did you develop over time into this curious person?
Yeah. That's a real. I mean, that's a great question. Um, I don't really know. I mean, I've always been friendly. I think I've had a lot of um. Yeah, I think I've always been like pretty curious. But I've also like I think from my childhood, my parents got divorced when I was really young. It was like
Hmm.
really messy. I was like very in between. My dad got remarried, and like my stepmom and my stepsister, like she eventually adopted me. I ended up with like my biological mom and my dad and my stepmom and like all of these different families, I guess.
Sure.
And I think like so from a very early age, like I just kind of had this drive to like bring people together.
Hmm.
To like I have a real capacity for um I I don't even want to say like I'm not necessarily empathy, but like just space for people. Like I kind of want like I just kind of want to make space for people to be okay however they are. And then I think the curiosity kind of came from that. But I think the initial drive was like, I gotta keep my families together. Like I gotta make sense of this. Like I'm getting pulled in all these different directions. And so I think, like we all have like, I don't know, a way to think about psychology is like, you know the wound of our childhood, or like the thing we're trying to rebuild, or the thing we're like focused on because of our specific experience. And I think for me it's been like I got to make family
Yeah.
wherever I am. And I have been that way for a while, because I think that comes from childhood. But our good friend Jackie spoke, like she's a poet and wrote this like really beautiful thing for our wedding when my wife Lindsay and I got married back in, it's been like almost 8 years now.
Mm.
She did this really cool poem in like 8 movements that she wrote and gave us like on our way from Seattle down here to California for the wedding. Lindsay and I, like something like the night before, and then she
Mm.
read something at the ceremony, and then she gave like a speech afterwards. And one of the things that Jackie said, and I was roommates with her for a while in Seattle, is just like, um, she's like, Austin will always say our instead of mine, or like us instead of I. Like as soon as he like moved in and started sleeping on a mattress on our floor, it was like, this is our kitchen and our meal and our cheese in the fridge, and like it was
Mhm.
all this like and she was like, she said, Austin, you make family wherever you go.
Mm.
And it was like she said it so beautifully, and it was like really cool for me to hear that reflected back, because I was like, oh, that is where that comes from. Like I've
Sure.
spent my whole life since I was like conscious, like it was like I was maybe 4 or like a little bit younger when my parents got divorced. And so I've spent so much of my like conscious existence like in that mode of like, oh, I gotta bring this back. I gotta bring this back together. I gotta bring
Yep.
people together. Like we've all got to be okay here. Like we've all got to be together. So I don't know that, but yeah, that's kind of like where it comes from for
Sure.
me, I guess. And curiosity, I think, is like, ebbed and flowed through that. I think like as I've learned more, as I've met more people, like it just kind of expands my interest and my curiosity to be like, oh, like there's a whole other way of being. And because I have that drive to like bring people together and for everybody to be okay, I think that's kind of like pushed my expanding sense of like what people can be, like what relationships can be, how people can exist in the world, like what they can look like, how they can experience life, like, that's just kind of like grown outward as I've like been, okay, we got to come together, like let's bring everybody into the family. Like it started off really broken for me, and I wanted to like expand that.
Sure.
um what about
Yeah.
you? Like
Yeah.
how would you describe that? Because I feel like, I mean, and I know, like I feel like I've met now a lot of your, I know Nick, who you've known since you guys were like, preschool age or whatever. Like I've met a few
Uh,
other friends you went to high school with. Like I feel like there's definitely a continuity of your energy for people and like curiosity. It seems like that goes back far, but like where does that come from for you?
uh, man, I think, man, I would, I have to give credit I would have to give credit to parents or past family members who, you know, or any family member who had an influence on me, not to be, too
I'd
woo
like to thank my mom. I'd like
you
to
know,
thank my
no, and whoever else bore them, you know what I mean? I guess this is my time to like
yeah,
shout out the ancestors and all that, you know?
yeah.
Um, so yeah, as as far as back as I can kind of remember, it's been I've been a social person and just been interested in people. Um, but like right now, what I'm thinking about the most is kind of similar to yeah, similar to you. Is like I think I go back to school and I talk about my, I talk about my education and that journey as the most unique thing ever. And it really has shaped a lot of me. And I get, first, like I said, starting off with parents, I had parents who similarly, growing up, you know, were not the best of friends, right? Like they
Hmm.
lived in the same house, but they weren't by any means the married couple. Or I don't even know what the hell that means anymore because I think the more I talk to people, the more I start to learn. Like, yeah, I don't know if everybody's parents were just like in
Right,
love, you know. Like, there's a lot of people whose parents were together, living in the same house, but like, yeah,
right.
we don't like each other.
Yeah, that ideal that you like imagined everybody else's parents had like is not
No,
there, right?
yeah.
That's interesting because I like sometimes I blame that on the Midwest because obviously I had that too, but I had this like, oh, like marriage was supposed to look this way. Like
Uh-huh.
we've had this horrible failure in my family. And it felt like that because it was like gnarly going through it, but also like, yeah, but that's, yeah, I think that's probably human nature. Like no matter what kind of like, no matter how strict of I don't know, religious background or not you're in, you still have that idea that like, oh, everybody else is like normal and we're,
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, regardless of that, I think I had two parents who reinforced the idea of, you know, respecting other people and embracing difference. So, my mom's Mexican, who grew up here. She's first generation here in California. Um, my dad is black from Virginia, very kind of rural area. And I think you have two people who, again, on paper, are really just totally different, um, but humble in a way where they've seen yeah, I guess they've just seen the beauty of like diversity. I think my mom growing up here in California, she's probably, she was exposed to that probably earlier. But my dad came from Virginia. I was like out of the military, and I think he was always searching for that. I think Virginia was very black and white, and the
Nope.
time he was growing up, I don't. I could imagine, and not even imagine that. I've heard stories where it was like it was extremely racist, right? Like flat out racism, and I think he's always said he was like, I had to get the hell out of there, right? And like, after I got out of the military, California seemed like the place to go. And I think that's still the case, right? There's still so many people. I mean, that's why we have 40 million people in this damn state right now, right?
Nope.
Like, I think that there is something here where people are like, man, I can get away from where I am, where yeah, maybe diversity is still very much black and white, right?
Mm.
Like I mean, and the country still operates that way, right? Like we still have this like black or white way of thinking, this binary, right? But
Hmm.
we know that diversity is not just about race, right?
What?
Spirituality, sexuality, all that stuff.
Yeah. What was it like? Like, I mean, it's like a big question, but it's interesting to me. I don't know exactly how to ask the question, but it's interesting to think like your dad's journey to California from Virginia, from like that level of, you know, that level of racism and white supremacy
Mhm.
that existed at that time in that part of the country. It felt different here. Obviously, this city that we, both live and work in now and have started Love Lab in, and that you've grown up here. You were like born here.
Yeah.
And it's this place where, like, you know, waves of people come from all over the country at different times in history to, you know, be accepted. It's a very diverse place. Like, there's this whole story of San Francisco. And yeah, so I don't know. I'm curious, like, what it's been like to be on the inside of that, right? Because I think a lot of times, like, we're really focused on what's wrong with the city, or like what we want to help make better. But there's also this interesting thing where it's like, yeah, like people like your dad came here because it was like, felt like maybe the best place in the country to be, if you want a more like diverse, open, like accepting environment. But it was just like your normal until you went off to college, right? So like,
Yeah. So growing up here, man, I've always been this, you know, like I've always been that kid in some way who stood out. Yeah, but not in a way stood out where I was like, there's something wrong, but just stood out, and no matter what. So yeah, we'll go. We've had this conversation, but for those who, you know, again, who haven't heard it, you know, San Francisco when I was growing up, I would say was a diverse city, still segregated. Neighborhoods were for a specific type of people, right?
yeah.
But you did have, yeah, there was a lot of flavors. And so when I say I stood out, I think early on I went to this, you know, private all boys school, and at you know, a black kid walking into this school is like automatically like there's only 6 of you total,
Mm,
right? And I do think that that was like the first sign of I don't really know what. Yeah, I think there were more conversations about race between me and my father than there were at the school, right? So it
mm,
was more so him telling me like, let me let you know who you are in at this school. And like there
mm,
was like conflicting messages because I'm the kid who's like, yeah, man, I'm just having fun. Like I'm at school. Like yes, I recognize that these children do not look like me, but
yeah,
I'm not really concerned about it right now. I'm loving the social aspect of it. And like I said, it was an all boys school, which was, I think it was good for me, right? I think there was something that was good about going to all boys school and not having distraction. And there's something, you know, I don't know. So it worked out for me. But I did recognize that majority of these kids are like, uh, yeah, so interesting. I think there was pressure on my dad. So my dad
mm,
owned a mobile car detailing service. Most of his clients were in Pacific Heights, which is this
mm,
affluent neighborhood in San
yep,
Francisco, right? So the reason he found out about that school was because he was asking his clients, like, where do you send your
mm,
kid to school? And they're like, oh, I send him here. And that's how he found out about it. And then going in, you know, I didn't think about, even though I can like remember kids being like, oh yeah, your dad works for my dad or whatever. And I'm like, I mean,
mm,
I don't see it that way because my dad's reinforcing.
yeah,
Like, I don't work for any of them. Like, those are my clients. I have a business. They pay me to do a service, right?
yeah,
Um, so I never really like. I don't really think I got it in my head until I got to maybe like sixth, seventh grade, where I was like, "Holy shit! Like, I really am different." Like,
mm,
and I can feel how I'm different, not only from certain
yeah,
students, but teachers as well, right?
yeah,
Like I can tell that I'm being treated differently. But nonetheless, man, I noticed kind of similar to what you were saying about space.
mm,
It was interesting to be, you know, like a popular kid because I'm athletic. And at that point, like, and for much of our young adult lives, like when you see somebody who's athletic, that can be the person who we like,
oh yeah,
yeah, just like
a lot
gravitate
of
towards.
cultural capital there. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
exactly. And I think, you know, that was one part of it, but the other part was like, yo, I knew like the super nerdy kids in class, right? Like I
Yeah,
was cool with them too. I was like, dude, whatever. I don't understand why people, not that I don't understand, but like I'm not gonna like I'm not gonna change who I am towards you because other people have said, oh, well, you're like a nerd, or like
Right.
you're an outcast, whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm saying? So I just remember early on, and a perfect example of that is Benny, our
Mm.
our IT guy, right? Like I've known him
Yep.
since elementary school. He's helped us out with our website and email
He's
stuff.
awesome.
But like, yeah, I mean, we just had a conversation the other day, and we've had this conversation fully where he recognized that he said, he was like, dude, we went to two different schools. We went to the same school, but it was two different schools for us, because the stories that you're telling me, and
Mm.
your experiences, I had no clue about.
Yeah.
No clue, right? So he's in his world, I'm in my world, but somehow we, like, we were able to connect. And so I always kind of had this place, and I'd like to think that, my parents, my mom was, my mom worked for the district attorney's office of San Francisco, in the child support bureau, right? So she's always had a passion for like helping kids, right? My dad used to run overnight programs for youth when they didn't have anywhere to go. You know what I mean? So there's always been this, I think, I don't want to say secret, but almost like an expectation, right? But
Mm.
you don't need to talk about it, right? There's just there was a message where you're like, hey, you're really lucky.
Mm.
You have two parents, regardless of the situation. You have two people who support you, and they tell you,
Mm.
that they're there for you, right? Not everybody has that opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think that just kind of trickled down, right? And
Mm.
so even when I was in these spaces where the kids are majority white or different from me, I was able to recognize people who didn't have the space to kind of be themselves, or like
Yeah.
they were ridiculed for being who they were. And I didn't have, like, I'm like, well, this is a weird kind of situation, because I'm like, I'm sure there's some people in here who really don't care for me because
Yeah.
of my skin tone and probably what their parents told them. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Right.
Um, but I also recognize that, like, I hold this kind of like celebrity on these like on this school, and that continued on until like high school too, right? Like I went to a high school that's predominantly white, and like a different world. But yeah, just seeing the same things. Where in high school it's different. Right now we're concerned about, well, arguably we're concerned about different things. But
That's
yeah,
interesting that you're seeing all these kind of like, I feel like you're talking about all the nuance in like cross-cutting identities, and this fact that like, yeah, like you're the black kid out of like one of six or something, maybe in middle
sure,
school, but also like you're an athlete and you like are open to these other, you're, your mom's Mexican, your dad's black, you already like come from like a plurality of identities.
sure,
um that's interesting to me, because I feel like, yeah, like, yeah, you're able to like play off of those different aspects of your identity, and like see kind of the way that people are interacting with you differently based on your skin tone, but then also like you as an athlete and what that means.
sure.
But I wonder, like, do you see the fact that like you weren't, it sounds like you weren't super aware of racism in school until like maybe you got into middle school or high school, like as you got older. And I wonder if,
Mhm.
like, back to the question about San Francisco, like I wonder if that is like, if that's to San Francisco's credit, almost like if the fact that like it took that, like, and I don't know what it would be like if you were growing up in Virginia at the same
Mhm.
time you were growing up here, but like, and it would depend on like what environment you're in and your community, and there's like a lot of different things. But
Sure.
I wonder if like maybe that's part of like living in, a more diverse, more open-minded, more liberal place, growing up in a place like San Francisco, is that like, it was less part of your consciousness, earlier on. Like it took longer before you really had to like see how shitty things can be. But
Sure.
I don't know if you would say that, but it sounds like that's kind of what you're saying, is that like your dad was like kind of coaching you, being super cautious, and it took a while until you were like, oh, okay, I see what he's
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, I think so. If we're talking about different places, right? You're talking about Virginia or Missouri, wherever it may be. I think that specifically in San Francisco and in California, in the major cities, because I think some people forget sometimes that like California is a huge state, and once you get outside of these major cities,
Yeah, different.
it is a totally different world, right? Um, and to think that there aren't, white supremacist neo-Nazi groups in California is, well, you're uninformed.
Yeah.
Just you're an uninformed person. But I do think it's more institutional here. That's where you see it. You see it in more like policy and systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so inherent and like you can't really see it. So it's easy to say, well, what do you mean? We're not racist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so important. That like this is super interesting because for one thing, like it makes sense that it would take a like if that's the case, and I agree with you on that from my perspective, it would take a little bit longer. Like you'd have to get a little bit older before you like see the depth of like the systemic racism and like
Sure.
what's and but I also think that that is a thing that holds back places like San Francisco a lot is that we feel like because we don't have because so many more people I think are like welcoming of diversity and like open to different cultures and different races and there's like maybe there's just more interaction, there's less segregation like socially or like in the way that people think about their political views or whatever, like there's this like cultural element, this like way that we think about ourselves and talk and like approach individuals. And I think that when that is maybe a little bit more open or liberal or welcoming or whatever the word, I don't know, like anti-racist, I guess. Well, and that's an interesting point because I feel like when the language is that way, you're not necessarily anti-racist. Like you have to be. And I think I'm thinking of that guy, Ibram Kendi.
Oh yeah,
Kendi.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah.
talking about? I think
Yeah.
he has like a really specific theory on this, which is like, you know, you can be racist or anti-racist and it's all about the outcomes of the system. So like you can be like the most open person and be like, I love all people. You can have like you can be you polyamorous with 12 different types of interracial relationships. And
Yeah.
like if you are like in an organization that has racist outcomes or like if you're part of like you vote for something that ends up with racist outcomes, you might have like the best intentions, you might really like have a beautiful heart, but like you're still upholding racist stuff because like the system is still giving us racist outcomes. Do you know what I mean? And so like
Yeah.
he's like and he like I like the way that he talks about that because it's like it feels like an important dimension of the conversation. Like I think that like people's biases and like that like racism that we just like we feel or that other us them like all that kind of shit like needs to be talked about too, like the psychological components to it. But I feel like sometimes a place like San Francisco gets really good at that. We've got the right language, we're super open, we're super diverse, da 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 da, and then like we're a little bit blinded to the systemic institutional racism, the stuff that's still happening, like the outcomes that we still have in the city based on shit that we maybe vote for that we think is really progressive. And it's like, Kendi's point is like, you have to be willing to be like, well, shit, like I thought that was going to have good outcomes, but it actually was like upholding a racist system. So like, let's change, we got to do something different. Like our good intention isn't enough to be anti-racist. We have to like measure what the outcomes are and figure out where the systems are still giving
Sure.
us racist outcomes. And then we have to change that shit. But something that I think is helpful about that a little bit is like it's just so, and I want your thoughts on this, obviously I'm coming at it from a completely different perspective, but I feel like it can be really important to have that dimension of the conversation because like you can get out of the defensiveness, kind of like if you're saying that like racism is something that exists that is like deeply embedded in almost all of our systems in humanity, and then we can kind of like we can make changes to that, we can measure what's happening, like I feel like you can a little bit pull out of that like defensive, like you're a racist, I'm not a racist, like, and so many people in there, like nobody very few people think that they're racist, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're like, no, of course I'm not a racist. And like, so you get into this conversation where it's like, well, it's like everybody thinks they're a good person, you know, like everybody. So like, if you don't have a way to talk about it, that's not just how you feel, but is like a step further to be like, what things are you doing
Yeah.
to like change the system or not? What are the outcomes of the things you're supporting or not supporting? Like, it almost is like, it's more important because like we can actually change outcomes if we focus on that stuff. But also I feel like it can be a helpful way to approach the conversation for those people that are like, I'm not racist, but you can be like, well, okay, like, look at what you're doing. Like, but you're not going to convince them necessarily that they're racist. Like, but you could say, hey, this thing that you support is giving us this outcome. Like, why don't we change it? Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think I think it's such a complex, so it's such a complex topic, but one
Yeah,
of the
to say
things,
the least.
yeah, to say the least, one of the things, golly, I can't remember her name. It might come to me in a second, but she had this exercise where, damn, it's killing me. Either way, she had this exercise where she pulled out pictures
Is
on a.
this is that D'Angelo? I think we
Yeah,
talked about her
yeah. I think
before.
it's Robin D'Angelo. Is it
I
Robin
thought I wanted to
D'Angelo?
say Robin. Yeah, I know who you're talking about though.
So she
She's a white woman who does a lot of the like anti-bias training stuff and like,
anti-bias trainings. Yeah. So
yeah.
she did something really simple and just showed pictures of like weddings and social events.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really good indicator of who you hanging out with. What conversations are you having? You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like, what situation, like, where are you where you can even discuss racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's
Mm-hmm.
encouraging you, right? And like, those are things that you talked about, you know what I mean? And like, when we first met, it's like, yeah, like, let's have those conversations. And
Yeah.
conversations is kind of like like you said, the first step. But
Mm-hmm.
who's your social circle, right? Who's your community? If your community is not really ready to talk about racism, well, then I don't know, like, maybe something you watch on TV or you hear on, you know, on Twitter or on Facebook, whatever it may be. But having, you know, that's the first step, is having the conversation, and then having a conversation, not an argument, right? Because that's kind of where we are right now. In this, I think we are pretty divisive. And if you don't agree with me, well, then we can't talk. Right?
Right.
I think there's countless times, right, where we see that. I mean, even in our news feeds, right? You talk about CNN
Oh, yeah.
versus Fox, or you know what I mean? Like, it's. I was talking to somebody who, I can't remember where he's from. Maybe Nigeria, but he was just saying, it's like, there's like two different worlds going on. Like,
Mm.
when you come to this country, depending on what you watch, it's
Yeah.
totally separate agendas, and it's very clear. Yeah, I mean, I think more conversation and just encouragement. You know, one of the things that kind of stood out, you know, kind of going back, I think we tend to, yeah, I mean, we could do this for hours on and hours, right?
Yes.
Just
Ping
keep
pong
going,
around. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like, oh,
Picking up
racism.
on
Hold
that
on.
thread.
Yeah.
Let me grab that
um,
one.
but I was thinking of, like, going back to like diversity and being exposed to people. I remember a really early conversation, and this, it was around, goddamn, maybe like sixth, seventh grade. And it was a little off put. Like, my dad is a really very open person, transparent. Um, I would say at some point people probably could find him maybe to be rude, because he doesn't really have a filter. You know what I mean? He's like, I don't think that there's that much shit that's inappropriate to talk about. Like,
Yeah.
I'll say, well, yeah, what's so damn inappropriate about it, right? So I remember we were talking about this. I'm gonna guess sixth, seventh grade, because it had to be around like puberty, because we started talking about sex. And he's telling me, he's like, look, like, it's very normal, which, again, I can appreciate that. Like, I appreciated it. Actually, I didn't appreciate it. It was just one of those, like, okay, I'll listen to you. But at this
Right.
point,
Now
I
you
can,
appreciate that you
now
have
at
somebody
time,
to
I was
give
like,
you that
oh,
thought.
damn, like, you were
Yeah.
legit, like, you were honest, and it wasn't
Right.
like aggressive, like, don't do this, don't do that. but I remember this conversation. We talk about diversity, and I remember he said, I remember he said, I didn't think two things about it. And he's like, "What do you think it's?" I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, "Do you think it'd be weird to think about having sex with another guy?" And I was like, I don't know. I've never thought about it." And he's like, "If you think about it, that like that's fine. Like, what is it?" And it was I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, you think everything in the world, right?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah,
That's
actually, I do.
great.
I do think about everything in the world. Like, my
Yeah.
brain to this day is constantly running, right? Like, I
Right.
mean, that's where we are. This is our tidbit into like the state of the world, right? Like, we're all sitting inside. We're all figuring out. Hopefully, we're all figuring out a little bit more about ourselves, figuring
You
out how
gotta
to
gotta do that internal work. Like there's nothing
exactly.
else to do, nowhere else to escape to.
And you gave me an excellent explanation of what the hell I'm going through right now. Like, my brain constantly is running,
Yeah.
and
And now your body can't keep up with it, so it's like this weird. Yeah.
so either way, like going back
That's
to that,
dope that he said that though. That's a very like even if it's like that simple, like he's opening up that like
it's
space for you to be like whatever's okay. Like you can talk like, I don't know if he was like you can talk to me about it or you felt like you could talk to him, but um that's a dope thing for a father to do to like go there and kind of like give you that space.
so I say that because it wasn't like we had a dialogue about it. I wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh well, like what does that mean? It was just, hey, I'm I'm willing to talk, right?
Yeah.
And like, this is coming from a heterosexual man, right? And like on paper, a heterosexual black man is not necessarily high on the list to talk about, hey, you know what? If you've thought about having sex with a guy, like, it's fine. It's like, whatever, no
Right.
big deal, no big deal. Like, so I think that's another, like, I said that because having the freedom to even think, having the freedom to have those conversations, I think has helped me so much in trying to like learn about people and not be afraid. Like, it was an example of not being afraid to talk about something that's different, or
Yeah.
talk about something that other people might look down on, or be feel I don't know, just just feel uncomfortable about. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's where I get some of that from.
That's cool. That's
Um,
massive. I feel like I've had to um I really had to like work for that, I think.
sure.
Like my upbringing was and that there's like that's an interesting difference. Like you got at least like a conversation with your dad and like a pretty open like, hey, whatever, like you can talk to me about whatever, even this, like it's fine.
Yeah.
And then being in San Francisco, being in a more diverse place, I grew up in a very conservative, narrow kind of view of like what is right and what is true. I got like like a little paperback Christian book on sex that was like we're not saying the palms of your hand are gonna grow hair if you masturbate, but
Right.
we're not saying that won't
It
happen. So
won't.
maybe just don't masturbate just in case. Like that's basically like literally the book. I mean, that's like the first paragraph you go to, right? So like I
Sure.
got the book when 12 years old or whatever, and that's like the paragraph. The paragraph's like, well, people used to think that if you masturbated you would grow hair on your hand,
Let
but
me see your hand. Show
but
me your
that's
hands,
the
Austin. Okay.
whoo. um but it's like one of those bullshit things where they like say the old thing that's obviously not true, but it's like, why'd you
Mhm.
have to even put that in there? Like you could have just. But anyway, it's just like the very like the most narrow, whereas I feel like that's
Mhm.
really that I'm happy for you. I love that your dad like opened that up for you, that you had a little conversation that like even there was some places in growing up where like you felt the ability to be a lot of different parts of your identity and like flex into those and feel like accepted for that, right?
Yeah.
um and I think, yeah, it's like it's taken work for me to be the one on my own to kind of like push for that like expansiveness, that openness, like for
Hmm.
other things to be okay that are outside of like this narrow thing. Um, Super interesting. And like, yeah, gosh, there's so many different like levels to that. And then on the other flip side, like I've been, even back in the Midwest and then here, like the most, privileged member of society, like the whole system is like set up so differently
Hmm.
for me. So it's like it's interesting to see those like different like cross-cutting places of our experience and like how, yeah, how different that is on all these different levels.
Yeah, but it's important. That's I think that's the important thing is that recognizing that like all these things are connected, right? I think that's what we're all trying to get at. And when I say all, I guess you and I, right, and other
Yeah,
people that are having these similar conversations, right?
totally.
It's we are all connected in one way, shape, or form, and we're seeing that, right? We're seeing that right now, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
if there isn't a more bright and shining moment to
yeah,
for humanity to just see like man we're all connected all over the world. We are shut down.
yeah. That like the reality of our interconnectedness is just like smacking us in the face right now. Like,
Yeah.
you idiots, like no
Yeah.
shit, like you've always been in this together. And like when, yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, like how it's like it's so, I feel like, especially when the more privileged portion of the world that's like fairly wealthy and has, like jobs and food and is doing all right and like some wealth, like it's really hard to see the interconnectedness, and it's so easy to just like not look at people that are like suffering. um and I feel like now like we're getting smacked up with the fan, like, okay, no, you
Hmm.
idiots, like you're all connected. But even there, it's interesting how like, again, like the people with like the salary jobs and money in the bank, like they're like still the people with privilege are still somewhat like inoculated from the worst things that are about to happen to the world. Like the people that, are working hourly, can't pay their rent, are already in poverty or like already struggling, are going to be hit the hardest. That's the same with like climate change stuff, like all of the things that like threaten humanity as a whole.
Hmm.
Like the people that are doing the most fucking damage and like are already like that, like can be that immune to it, will like continue, even though they will also suffer. Like there are people that are like obviously like, well off, that are also suffering in some way from the economics of this or from
Oh,
like
wealthy
dying.
problems are real problems too. Wealthy
Well,
problems are real problems. Now you
what do
might
you,
have a little bit. Well, if you don't think that there's some like struggle with wealthy people, then I think you're mistaken, right? There's the same,
totally.
right? Like everyone, and that's what we're trying to like. Everyone, everyone has something going on. Now, whether or not you have access to the resources to like help you, that's a different story. So I think what we're talking about right now, and it'll be interesting to see how we come out of this, because there's going to be a lot of wealth. I think there's a lot of wealthy people who are going to come out of this not so wealthy. Nobody
Yeah,
really knows
yeah,
nobody really knows
totally.
what's going to happen after we shift after we shift out of this and try to figure out like okay there's definitely businesses that are shutting down, like they're closing
Yeah,
their doors, they can't operate anymore, right? Yeah,
sure.
we're just at a time of uncertainty, but I think that again we're talking about this message of connectedness and like what makes us, man, such an interesting time to start this, yeah, to start this movement um, and connect as many people as we possibly can. And I think you touched on it with, I think we both just touched on it in terms of like your health, right? It really is like prioritizing like your health right now and um, how do you operate day to day. Um, And if you're somebody like, both of us are fortunate right now, right? We have a roof over our head. I ate, you ate, like things are okay, right? And we've recognized through our Feed the People event, that's not the case, right? So um, yeah, hopefully we can come. Hopefully this is a great time for reflection, right? Like our Feed the People event. Yeah, we go down to the Tenderloin. We're partnering. We're connecting um, with restaurants, with grocery stores, with schools, um, with companies, with organizations to get 100% donation and volunteer based event. Serve people, who don't have access to food or clothes.
It's been cool. I feel like, I mean, obviously it's, we had to cancel our one in March, like that was
Mhm.
about to happen like next week because we're, sheltering in place, not going out, all that kind of stuff. But it's been kind of cool to see so many other people like over the last couple of weeks trying to do things for others, like spreading around how to donate to food pantries, like how to do like the thing that we do on a quarterly basis with Feed the People that we've been doing. It's almost like that is like ramped up and everybody's in on it. Like, how can we help? How can we connect? Like, I was reading about a gin distillery in the city who's like going to try to start making hand sanitizer. They got shut down and they're like, we can't, which is funny, like hella funny to think about, but they were like, we can't, like, we're not, like, I think that they were saying that it's like not an essential business to keep making gin. So like they're supposed to shut down, but they were like asking one of the SF supervisors, like, can we just like make hand sanitizer? And they're like, yeah, just fucking do it. Like, do whatever. Like, normally you'd have to get permitted, do all this stuff, but like if you have a way to make hand sanitizer for people, like,
Right,
do it, because this is kind
right.
of like wartime feelings of like, do what you can, help each other out, jump in, do all this stuff.
So,
I feel like that, and that's been kind of like a silver lining or like a beautiful kind of thing to see is like how I haven't really seen, I mean, people stocking up on toilet paper, like what the hell is that? But like I haven't
no.
seen people like I haven't seen like really like the selfish or like the self-preservation instinct as much as I've seen all of this like people coming together, like using this as a way to like see the people that are less fortunate than them, like understand, like, yes, like everybody's gonna have problems, and if you are wealthy and healthy and like all of that, like you're gonna feel anxious, things are gonna change, like, and everything's so relative anyway, like we're all gonna be struggling, but also like it's really beautiful to see people that are like, yeah, I'm anxious, I'm struggling, but like I have some money in the bank, I'm still getting a paycheck,
Hmm.
who can I help? Like, it's going to be fucking nuts for the people that are living outside, for the people that were barely making rent anyway, and to see that like recognition, I feel like that's kind of like a lot of what Love Lab has been kind of premised on in my mind, is like this idea that like right below the surface everybody wants to help each other, like right below, like people in tech like feel weird about moving to San Francisco and gentrifying and displacing people, like they want it, like they don't, like they want to help, they want to come together, they want to build a community, like there is like right underneath the surface there's this like whole iceberg of um desire for connection and like grace and generosity for people. And I feel like what we've been trying to do with Love Lab is kind of like, or like the premise behind it is like that exists, like even the tech community here in San Francisco, like they get hated on a lot, like there's a lot of love there and a lot of like willingness to help, and if we can like tap into it, or if we can just like help, you know open that up a little bit. And I feel like, we've done a lot of, like, we've done that in a lot of ways. We've seen that with some
Sure.
of the companies and the organizations we've supported and have gotten it to come out for Feed the People or other events. But we're also seeing it right now. Like, it's like nothing like a global pandemic to like tap that well of like generosity and people that really actually do care about people, just need a little push.
Sure. But yeah, we've done some. I like that. Love Lab really was birthed out of service and like serving people. I think I can remember that conversation. And I was like, hey, I have this idea. Like, why don't we do, why don't we serve someone, have like a social impact event? And that's how we get people organized, because I think we were in that early, like we're in that early stage of trying to figure out like, okay, well, we threw these events, we threw a couple of events where we did have people, but yeah, it wasn't, we weren't, yeah, there was something more. The events were great, but there was something more. And I think it's like getting down and recognizing, getting your head out of your Instagram feed, your Twitter feed, your Slack, your whatever channel you're using to communicate with people or get your news or whatever, and just take a look at what is going on. And I think San Francisco is a great example. It actually, I think it's the epitome of like what's going on globally, right? We have this huge divide of really wealthy folks and then we've got a huge group of people that we're seeing right now who are just squeaking by and like just getting by. Like, if I don't get that check, I don't have a place to live, right? Like, and that's not specific, again, not specific to San Francisco, but if folks who visit here, I think they're like, oh my God, you guys have a lot of homeless people. And I'm like, yeah, we do have a lot of homeless people. And there's a deeper issue there, but it is a little scary how we've normalized it. Where we walk by people who are like really going through a tough time. And we're like, oh, well, that's kind of how it is here. And it feels overwhelming at times, right? Because you're like, I can't help everybody, right? But this idea of like, well, it's really easy for us to walk by it and be distracted. Just be distracted by whatever is consuming our time, but I agree with you, man. I think that there's more good than what this thing is telling us. I think there's way more good. And we subscribe to, we have a really easy time, for whatever reason, we have a really easy time just eating up bad news and just like dark stuff. We're like, oh yeah, give me more. I love this. Like, oh God, I haven't had enough bad news for the day. Yeah. Or like something as simple. I think we're getting out of this, but you remember people used to like pride themselves like, oh man, like I got 2 hours of sleep and like I worked 19 hours and like they prided themselves on it. And, like we pride ourselves and it's like we want to, it's like a sign of like how tough we are. You know what I mean? But I think there's a lot of good people. I think there's folks who are doing great stuff. And we just don't, and we're getting to that place where we can actually acknowledge it, right? We can acknowledge like, man, there's some folks doing it. We can see it. Now we need more of it, right? I don't think there's, I don't think we're like, I don't think we're at 100%, right? No. We can always improve. But I do think like small, like I loved your idea this past week. We were talking, we said like, oh, how do we help? Like, what do we do? Do we start the GoFundMe? Do we get money directly into people's pockets? And then you just feel like, I did some research. There are organizations who are already doing good work and they have plans in place. Again, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's connecting what is already in place, right? I think currently, kind of going back to the school conversation, currently in school, doing my master's of social work. And if there's one just solid theme, it's connecting the dots. It's not about like, oh, well, like this is a course. Like, no. How do we get this person connected to these services? And how do we maneuver through these systems that are in place? It's not about creating a new one. It's, hey, for the time being, we got to figure out how to maneuver through these systems in order to get this person what you want, or get this person what they need. And as a as a social worker, what can you do? How do you help support them and advocate for them, right? I guess that's a great kind of. It's another great example of like why connection is so important to me.
Right? Yeah,
when I was thinking about going back to grad school, like, what would I go back to grad school for? And I noticed that I had, folks in social work in my close community, and then after kind of researching the program, and kind of being, yeah, it's interesting to be kind of like a year out. And I can remember at this point in time last year, yeah, I was
Were
preparing to
you
leave.
applying for stuff or what? Oh
No, at this
no.
time last year,
Oh,
man, I was getting ready to leave San Francisco. Right?
yeah,
Like
that's wild.
I was getting ready to leave San Francisco for a relationship, and I had and that's fine, right? We've had countless conversations about that. Like that's fine, but just to think about like a year ago, I was starting to explore.
That's a lot you've accomplished in a year. It's a
Hey, I think we're all
that's a
capable.
year.
We're capable of a lot, right?
Yeah,
We're all capable of doing
so
a lot.
true. So true.
But to like, yeah, just to think of like where this has gone in a short amount of time.
Yeah. I
And
love the like I think that the connection like I I've been yeah, I feel like I've been really aligned. We've been really aligned in that idea of like connecting the dots, connecting the people. Like I think we both have, not everybody does, but I think we both have like this kind of fundamental like belief in the goodness that's right there, like all the good
mhm,
that is there that like people need a little bit of help with. And like if we can push them in that direction, or we can open up this, or we can like show them this thing, like we both kind of have that belief. And then I feel like it's been really good to like to kind of check each other on that, to have that as like a guiding principle of like what we're trying to do with Love Lab. Um, because it takes a lot of the ego out of it. Like it takes a lot of the like, we're gonna do this new thing. We've got to come up with a great idea, or like
mhm,
this like it's about us, and that all connects back to the device, like how you're gonna present yourself, your personal brand, blah, 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 blah. Like we're in this, this fucking mind game all the time, in terms of how we interact with each other, like over the internet. But that's been really key, I think, to be like, how can we like like if we had the opportunity to change a system and make it more equitable and better, like we should do that. We should look at things system wide and do what we can to change it. Like going back to like the, you know, anti-racism, and like looking at like where there's outcomes that are bad for people and that you can like change the whole system. That's awesome. But then also there is so much that's already working within the system, or so much that's already there. Like we looked around and we were like, workers who care about stuff and who have, can you still hear me?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Who like say that they care about stuff, at least like they're like in there, like, and they've got the resources, they've got the time. Like, how do we like put those people to work? How do we like just connect the dots for them? And that's been a cool model for me, because I am totally susceptible to that. Like, I want to do a cool thing. I want to feel good about what I'm doing. I want to like have the idea, start the thing,
Mm-hmm.
do something new, add in it. And then, I remember like we talked about like a community center, like do it like something more concrete. And you're looking around, it's like, well, what currently exists? And then you're like, oh shit, there's like a lot of stuff that actually just needs more help.
Sure.
And then you like, there's that ego part of me is like, oh, damn it. Like I wanted to, like, why can't I be the only one who had this idea and bring it to the city, but then it's like, oh, cool. Like, and you really helped me at the beginning of Love Lab. I think like we had a few, like both of us had a few different dreams and ideas, things in our hearts that we cared about, that were like bouncing off of each other in all these conversations. And I remember like that was a big part of it for me, is that like I really wanted to like offer some sort of space, services for the people that are unhoused in our city and are like at the margins, the ones that you walk by and like you should feel disturbed by a lot of San Francisco when you're out
Mm-hmm.
walking around. And it's hard to, if you walk by these people every day, to like hold enough like grief and compassion in your heart when you're like walking by every day and you've got a million things that you're worried about. But I wanted to do something, and I got like had a really shit week at work, and I was like, all right, we're gonna like get some grant money and start this community, and, like, find a building and have a space, and I think I don't know. I mean, I've seen other people do it. Like they're like some friends of mine started a community center in Seattle. That's like, so I was kind of like working off of a model that I had in my brain, but I also like thought it would be cool to like start a new thing, dive in. And you were like, well, what if we just
did something, like didn't wait until like we had
Yeah.
grant money and a building, but like let's just, we don't need it. Why do we need a place? Like we don't need a fucking address. Like let's go, let's just go help people. And that, like that combination of like what I was kind of wanting to do, and then like your view on it is what really birthed like the first Feed the People. And this whole project of like, we can tap into this community of people who have resources and time, and companies who are willing to like give their employees a volunteer day off. And we can connect that to the people that are right here, and like just go out and, you know, connect those dots. And so I just think that's cool. Like the connection piece, like how both of us kind of have come to that model of like, and have that desire in our hearts of like connecting the dots and like connecting people and communities. And I think like how good of a way, like how important that is as like a check on your ego. Like when your identity is getting overrun and you're like, well, I'm going to be somebody who helps people. I need to feel good about myself. I need to be able to do this, that, or the other. And to just look around and be like, how can I be of help? Is a less ego driven. And often, you know, and if there's something new that needs to be created, like, fuck, we'll create it. Like, cool.
Right.
Like there's like, if it shows up that like, this is what the universe needs you to do, like, all right, sign us up. But it's been really powerful and good for me, I think, for us to kind of have that check on each other and to look and be like, okay, what can we do now? How can we help people immediately? And how can we serve, you know, and help the organizations that are already out there doing stuff, instead of just like trying to reinvent the wheel just for our own sake, you know?
Yeah. I think that I've been reminded in the past, I think 3-4 months, yeah, just with being overwhelmed and just on a roller coaster ride with school and life, Love Lab, with everything, right?
Yeah.
I had a great reminder, and I told you about this, from a comedian, to have fun.
Yeah.
Like, and I forgot about that part. And the more I reflect back on this whole process of like creating this Feed the People, and just figuring out what is Love Lab, right? And how do we, like building it. It's been fucking fun. Yeah. I've had so much fun. Like when I reflect back and think about, like, well, I don't know how we're gonna do it, but we're gonna do it, and like it's our thing. It's our thing. Like I think, you know, we were concerned, like, oh, did we get enough donations? And we, you know, like, who cares? Like, if we didn't get enough donations, we got some donations. Right. We got more donations than we got when we weren't doing this. Yeah. Like,
and when nobody was doing it, right?
When nobody was doing it, right? Like,
totally.
And the first guest on the podcast was a friend of mine, David Lavin, and he was like, "Hey, man, you know, just remember, like, you're creating something that wasn't there before." And David's a film producer and a director, and he was just talking about, like, no, that's the fun. The fun is creating something that was never there before, right? And I've had a ball, and I think I wanted to mention this because I think we do this whenever we talk. I think we're pretty good about like giving each other, you know, or showing some gratitude, right? And I think one of the most like solid moments where like I was confident and fucking like, I was confident and just uncertain at the same time, is that I think when we got to our first our first debate in a while about like expectations. You and your wife have had a kid. Whenever you're starting something, it is uncertain. You're trying to figure out, like, well, how, you know, I started school. Yeah. Life's happening, and and we had to like slow down for a second and be like, wait. Let's talk. And that was, again, uncertain at one point, because I don't think it's easy, right? I don't think that it's ever easy to like disagree about something, or not even disagree, but just have a conversation about like a difference of opinion, and
just like communicate well with there's so many, yeah, there's like so many things that you're trying to do together and different opinions and not enough time to like check in on a regular basis. Like,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. And our conversation, I mean, you know, hopefully people have picked this up, and we talked about this before we started. Hopefully when people listen or see this, they'll feel the like fluidity and like how easy it is for us to talk. And this is how it's been for a while now. And so to take that from a friendship into a business, it can be difficult. It can be really, really hard because you're like, well, wait, hold on, it's just different conversations, right?
Yep.
And yeah, I that just, it dawned on me, and I was like, yeah, let me get that out, because I think that's important for people to hear.
Yeah.
That it is about like, dude, it's not, we don't disagree, right? This is, yeah. Right. Love requires often love in a sense, not to get too woo, but it does require a little conflict.
Yeah, totally.
It's not all peaches and cream.
Yeah. And I wonder if, I don't know if you've come across this language, but when I was in grad school studying therapy, like, I don't even remember who this comes from, probably some specific person, but I've been thinking a lot about the concept of rupture and repair, and like, you can't like, and that's like a therapeutic concept that like in the relationship, you're going to have this, and it's like really in any relationship, like you will have ruptures, like something will break, you will disagree, you will hurt each other, you know, you will miscommunicate, whatever. And then you have a repair process. And like, that process is actually better than if you'd never had the rupture. Like if you were just going along and somehow you like, we're all on the same page all the time, like there's something really important and something beautiful about that process in and of itself, of like, we fail each other, or we miscommunicate, or something ruptures, and then we get the chance to like, to talk, to repair it, to figure it out. And yeah, it's hard, like, yeah, being in, and especially like, I think being in a partnership where you're like, we're just doing this together. There's no, sometimes it's almost easier at work where I'm like, well, okay, fuck. Like, well, my boss will make the final decision. Like, we disagree on this, but like, there's a chain of command where like somebody will just make a call. And we're building something new and we're doing it together. And so we kind of like, yeah, like the hard work of it is the rupture, repair, coming together, figuring out how to communicate, all of that. But I think when you think that you're not supposed to have the rupture, when you're just like, oh, things should be fine, we shouldn't fight, you know, like, then it feels like this really difficult thing. But I think rupture and repair is even something that you can have fun with. If you're like, oh no, this is the relationship, this is the work, this is the friendship, this is the partnership, like this is it, like going through this up and down process is just what it is. And so like, enjoy it, which is like the same as like, you're starting something new, it's hard work, you're trying to get donations, you're worried you're not gonna have enough, but like, that's it, like that's the thing, just have fun with it, like bring your full self to it, and have a little bit of fun. That's been helpful for me. That's been like a really important thing, like with my art too, like how easy it is for me to like, I care so much about my painting, and then like I can get to a place where I'm like, I'm not having any fun at all, like I am just like, I'm so anxious, I want it to turn out a certain way, like I've just like lost the joy because I'm so like wound real tight about it, because it's something I care so much about. So there's something like even good about that. And then can you like wake up to that a little bit of like, this is all just the process. There's no perfect ideal world where like everything I ever put on canvas is immediately a masterpiece, or like any conversation Joseph and I have, we're like immediately in perfect agreement. Like that's just that, if you think that that's like some sort of an ideal that you're missing out on, just like with parents, like if you think that like parents are supposed to be perfectly together in this way, then like you have this weird just like false idea of what things are supposed to be like, and then everything feels like a struggle. But if you just realize like, this is what it's supposed to be a struggle, we're supposed to feel all these different ways, then you can have fun even when you're feeling the struggle, even when you're like dissatisfied with the outcome of something, like you can like notice that, and still like enjoy the process.
I wanted to pull it out and I don't know where it was, but man, where did it go?
What?
I want to find it. Hold on one second. I know it's here somewhere.
In the meantime, we can show off Rufo's new haircut.
Tiny.
What's up, Rufo? He's got his Giants hoodie on.
I had a book that you gave me that I wanted to shout out, but now, I guess I'm not going to be able to find it when I guess I was reading at some point. You gave me
What is it?
The War of Art.
Yes.
You gave me
Yes. I'm so glad I gave you that.
Yeah, you gave me The War of Art. And
that's a book by Stephen Pressfield, by the way. For listeners.
It is by Stephen. Thank you for writing something really cool. And just, man, he talked about resistance.
Yep.
Right? And I love that idea. Like normal, like it's coming, it's there. It's always gonna be. It's always gonna be.
Not escaping it.
It's about accepting. Like, this is a part. This is a part of the process, and that's what I wanted to reference.
And the resistance will get the most intense around things that are like really important to you, and so like that's how it works. And his way of writing that really like. I think it normalizes the process and is exactly what we're talking about, like allows you to be like, oh, this is all part of it. Like if I'm doing creative work, I'm going to show up to it. And like, there's going to be a million parts to my brain that are like trying to sabotage me because this is what I really want to do. And that's just like,
I found it.
There it is. Were you sitting on it or something? He's like, oh, got it. Keeping it warm.
It was propping up the mic.
Oh, that's so... Oh, that's good. That's good.
That was like the epitome of like what has been going on.
That's so funny.
Damn rules. You're like, wait, where is it? I just
looking everywhere. It's like everything's within 5 feet of you. You just have to.
Right there.
That's so funny.
Yeah, man. This was a great. I mean, I'm still reading. You ever read a book and you're like, I don't want to read page cover to back, you know what I mean? Right. It's like, I'll take bits and pieces when I want. Then again, kind of like this, I think sometimes we get so ingrained in what is it? Just in the process sometimes, right? That we don't take the step. We don't take a step back. Put your head down. In your case, it's painting, right? And sometimes you do. That's like the work. That's the work. You got to put in time in order to develop that skill. With me, DJing, listening to music constantly, right? But understanding like, hey, there's going to be breaks. It's not all linear, right? Like it's
and you're not on your way to some perfect outcome. Like this is just like you will be struggling with your art or your work or your relationships, all of the above. For the rest of our lives. Like that's what it is to be human, is to like struggle with these things. And I think there's, you can get really into the process where you're like in a flow state, and like more power to you, beautiful, be in a flow state as much as possible. But you can get into your process with your mind so much where you're like just struggling and in it. And like, I think, you're saying that there's a way to zoom out a little bit, observe the process, like understand that resistance is all part of it. And then be able to like love the whole struggle and then take joy in the whole struggle, like have fun with it. Because it's just what it is versus like trying to get to that finish line. Oh shit, it's not the way that I thought. And like, I just think that like that difference between like seeing life as a journey, seeing the project as like getting to that finish line as quickly as you can, or seeing something as like some ideal perfection, like relationships shouldn't be hard, or they should like, this should be easy. You got to throw all that out and just be like, this is the process. Rupture, repair, struggle, resistance, like cool, like this is the rest of our life, so might as well like have a little fun with it because it's not going away. Like and that part, like having the struggle is part of like having the rupture is what makes the repair so sweet. Like if you didn't have that and you were just like, we'd all be fucking going insane. Like if our life was just like a constant monotonous, like everything is fine, like nothing feels different. Like we have to go up and down. Like that's just what it is to be like a living being.
Yeah, I mean, even in the conversation, even when I was thinking about like how I wanted this to go, right? It's like, oh, what direction do I want it to be? How do I want to present this to people, right?
Yeah.
I don't think 10,000 people are watching this.
You mean like this conversation right now?
Yeah. Like before, I was like planning. I was like, I put the like put all this in perspective, like, oh, well, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of the conversation? Right? And I was like, well, it's just an introduction of like who we are.
Yeah.
And like, yes, we'll touch on Love Lab, but it's more so understand who we are, and that'll give you more understanding of what Love Lab is, where it came from.
Yeah. Oh.
All right. And I don't know if we necessarily have that all the time, right? It's always like we're focused on like I guess
doing
the brand, or like what
Yeah.
are you trying to do?
Totally.
And I said it before, I think it's important that people hear this, just hear the exchange of thoughts and ideas, and kind of where we came from, and like how we got to this point.
Yep.
And
Let
again,
people into the process. And like, I think now more than ever, like, we just need to be like in each other's ears, and like, you know, like, we can't be in each other's space right now. So like being able to, you know, see each other, chat, like share this just like natural dynamic and conversation with other people, I think is like, is important. And it'd be good, like this, it could be a, you know, a good thing for us to do on a more regular basis. You know, I know you've been getting some different people on to talk, and I think even, yeah, like your point, like people are going to be craving some sort of connection, and a lot of it's going to be over Zoom or YouTube or whatever, because we have to.
Yeah, we all came. I don't know if you participated in any of these Instagram challenges.
I haven't. No, I have not been on Instagram, actually. You sent me a Guy J thing I need to go look at. I have not been on, but
well, that's a positive. That's a positive.
Oh no, are they back?
No, they're fun, right? So it was the weekend when we all finally sat down. We're like, oh wait, okay, this is real.
Saturday night. I can't go anywhere. Yeah, Saturday night must have been rough for you. Oh, so sad.
So I think it was Friday when it started.
Yeah.
So there were these tags. With people, and it started off. And the first one I saw was like 10 push-ups, and I was like, oh, okay, great. Like I see. I was like, all right, 10 push-ups. I don't really. I'm not too active on Instagram.
You didn't videotape yourself doing 10 push-ups, and
I gave in.
You did?
Yeah, I gave in.
All right.
I had to think about it. I had to get out of why I didn't want to do it.
Right.
I was like,
well, now Instagram's a different thing for you now, because like before it was like, okay, I could be sitting on Instagram, or I could like be out in the city with people in person.
Sure.
But now it's like, oh, you want to be with people, like maybe you need to pick up some different tools that you didn't like so much before, right?
And I recognized that there was this thing. I was like, at the root of it, people are trying to encourage people to like stay active.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's actually, you know what? That's a great thing. I can get on board with that. And then the next one was take a shot. And I was like, oh.
I can get on board with that too.
Okay, well, I guess I can get on board with that. And so now I'm seeing people, now it's like starting to progress, where it's like, it was 1, now it's 3 shots. Oh, now it's 50 push-ups here. Oh, now it's 20 squats, or you know what I'm saying? I'm like, okay, all right, well, y'all have fun with all that. Okay, I'm good. But I participated. So yeah, I say that as like, this is, I think now that we're going to start to set in, now this is what, like, now we're in our regular Monday through Friday deal, or Monday through Thursday, whatever.
Yeah.
Now I think is really good for people to like figure out what it is that they need. And maybe this conversation between you and I is helpful.
Yep.
I was also thinking, I wanted to run this by you when we talk next, but this is the next time we talk. I was thinking about putting a mix together to put on our LoveLab SoundCloud, and,
awesome.
and just have some music for people to listen to, because it's not all about just podcasting all the time and just conversation.
100%. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So to just put some music out there.
Yep.
When you're doing whatever it is that you're doing.
I love it. And I think like we got to keep getting creative about this, but like it'd be sweet too to like set up some Zoom happy hours, or like maybe like you set up and you like DJ a little bit in your room. We have to figure out like so the sound quality isn't horrible. Maybe there's a good way to do that, but like
There is.
just to like have, you know, like maybe you set up like a live stream to actually like DJ live set and let people like come into it. And like I think it's good at this time to get kind of creative about how to use the internet
Yeah.
in general. Like doesn't mean Instagram challenges like great, awesome, but like also Instagram can be awesome and has its own other host of like rabbit hole depressive comparison kind of tendencies when everyone's self-branding. So it's like, yeah, that's awesome for some people, but also like what else can we do? Like I've heard of people doing more of these like Skype dinners, happy hour stuff. Like I think like some sort of like a, maybe what we do is we like set up a time when I'll go to my studio and I'll set up Zoom and I'll paint and you just set up your stuff and DJ if we can get the sound quality good. And then we just open it up in a Google Hangout or Zoom or whatever for whoever wants to join to just like pop in. People can like, dance, chill, draw, paint, do their own thing, just like hang out, chat.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Hopefully the governor or mayor's office isn't tuning into our Love Lab conversation and be like, actually, there's a stay-at-home order in place.
Okay,
so.
well, I feel like I was talking about to Lindsay on this. I was like, my studio is still like shelter in place, right? Because it's like I rent it. It's like my apartment. Like I rent it. It's single occupancy. It's not like everyone's there. Like I think I can still go there, right?
I don't know. I'd be
Mayor Breed. What do you say, Mayor Breed? Can I?
Is it possible?
It's for my mental health. It's therapy. I actually haven't been yet. I've been thinking that like I could bike or walk there, avoid people. Nobody else is gonna be there. It's like I have my own space, right? Like I don't feel like that's irresponsible.
I think that's what all the artists are probably saying right now. Like no one will be there. It'll be fine. And then you go out and you're like, oh, hey.
Yeah, that might be true.
Yeah.
I have busted out like a few things here. Like I've got some like doing ink drawings and stuff like that. So maybe I don't go to my studio for a while, but I just like get back to my pen and ink stuff.
Yeah.
But either way,
I think that we need to do something. Yeah, I think this has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
As all of our conversations clearly are. I
mean,
clearly, right?
Never a bad one.
Yeah, but I like the idea during this time because we don't really we don't know when these restrictions will be lifted, and so yeah, we should definitely be working on connecting people in whatever way we can, and definitely want to still encourage people to wherever you're listening, research how you can help this situation. There's
easy way is like look up your local food bank, donate. Like that's one of the easiest ways. If you haven't done that yet, I'd be like carve out whatever money you can to donate to a food bank, because that's going to be important that food banks have like cash on hand to restock and that they can get people food. And then Meals on Wheels is a good one because like they're serving the elderly specifically, so that's food. Those are the two big ones that I've seen. In San Francisco, of course, like the Coalition on Homelessness can use extra funds always. And
I mean, really, I think it's a good time to like reflect, right? Where do you frequent? Is there a restaurant that you go to? If there's a restaurant, there's probably servers there. If they're open, how can you, contact them? How can you support?
Buy gift cards. But like, that's a good thing. Like reflect on like, what do you do on your daily? And I would say like, reflect on like how much, especially if you're somebody who's like, you're working from home, you still got your salary, your income hasn't really been affected. How much money a week do you spend on lunches and happy hours and stuff like that? Like at least that much money, like you should be given somewhere else, right? Like maybe you can like just calculate up like how much you spend on coffee and stuff, and buy some gift cards to some of the local coffee shops and the places you go to, donate to some of these places. But yeah, it is like the reflecting. It can be different no matter where you're at, whatever your life is like there's people in it that could use help. So obviously there's some like, ways we can suggest, but I think like the reflecting on like what matters to you and what's in your day-to-day life and
who's most vulnerable right now? Who's most vulnerable in your community?
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
it might not necessarily be within your, you know, your close friends. It might be, but it might not be. But think about who's the most vulnerable right now. How can I help support them?
Yep.
Right. And I think that's something to just keep in mind as we move further through this unique point in time. And anything else? Anything else you got?
That's it. We'll we'll do some stuff. We'll let you know. But I was just thinking we should get see if Amy wants to do some live painting over Zoom too, or like some sort of like art stuff from her place.
Yeah, I think that maybe we should have Amy on. Definitely have Amy on the podcast, and also do something live, maybe at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see some benefit there.
That'd be cool. I mean, yeah, we could have her kind of like walk us through like something that you could do even just with like a pad of paper and pins, you know, like she can do some of her art therapy stuff, but we could just do it easy for anybody. Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Well,
great.
As always,
awesome conversation, Joseph. Grateful for you and for Love Lab and all the people that have just like given us so much love, generosity, and like, you know, putting stuff together now in these crazy times too. So we'll just have to stay connected, figure out ways, stay sane, do those 50 push-ups.
I will do those 50 push-ups.
A shot in the a shot after each set of 10. That's the challenge. Yeah. I want a video. Text me that video when you're done.